Philosopher Asmongold, I'm making this video for you because I know that you have a mind that's able to critically think and look at the worldviews of many different individuals and formulate your own that is honest and just saying it like it is. And a lot of people respect your wisdom. You're able to entertain different thoughts and be able to see past different divisions in society. Well, in this video, I want to share with you some unique ideas. Now, I made videos before dedicated to you actually about Lotro, and it's not about me just saying you need to look at this or I want people to agree with me. It's not about that. Although my Lotro video got about 10,000 views and you never watched it, people got a lot of value out of it. So maybe you're somebody from his community and you're not Asmongold himself. Totally fine. Watch this video because I have questions for you. More questions than answers, because I want you to think about your own belief system and what you yourself believes. Because believe it or not, our mind makes up our actions and our actions make up the world. And we have to evaluate our own mind. We might be contradictive in our morals. We may tell someone to do something but not realize that we're doing something ourselves. And Asmongold often says, you know, we shouldn't really mess with other people's lives. And why is that not an easy thing to do? Is just leave other people alone. I totally agree with that. And most people agree, like, why not just leave other people alone? It sounds like it's such a simple thing, but perhaps on a grand scale, people aren't really leaving other people alone and they don't realize why that is. And maybe they have this attachment and an ego and identities, and we want to get past all this and not really fit ourselves into a box. You can look at someone like Asmongold and you say, wow, he's more of a nonconformist, but really he's thinking for himself, which is the whole reason why I'm making this video. I strive to be honest myself, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I don't make any money off of this video. I'm trying to share ideas that I think are important. So I'm going to put these questions on the screen for you, and I want you to think about this. Now, if you're Asmongold yourself, I know you're probably going to pause the video a billion times and maybe, you know, watch this video 4 times its length for your reaction. Totally fine and expected. I'm going to also share with you the Stanley Milgram experiment. This experiment is a banned psychological experiment which goes more into detail about this belief system, which again, most people in society have. Then I'm going to finalize with a video from Larkin Rose, who's an author of a book called The Most Dangerous Superstition. He details this in detail, and it's really eye-opening for a lot of individuals. Now, of course, I can speak about this, but I have many videos on my own channel about this, and I don't want to speak to the choir in the echo chamber that is my own community. I want to share a different video, so that's why I want to bring in Larkin Rose. He's also very great about speaking with all these ideas, and I think that he also has an open-minded worldview past all the different divisions in society. So this could help a lot of individuals, and a lot more than they may realize. Some people might be opposed to it at first, but I know if you're able to entertain a thought, be totally honest, you can offend me by just speaking your mind all you want. I want to hear and just get this conversation going about these ideas that so few people talk about.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the greater New Haven area.
Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake.
Would you roll up your right sleeve, please?
This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn.
Do you have any questions now before we go into the next room?
About 2 years ago, I was at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven. And while there, they detected a heart condition. There's nothing serious, but as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test and be seated in front of the shock generator, please, in the next room?
But the experiment was rigged.
The victim was an accomplice of the experimenter. The victim, according to plan, provided many wrong answers. His verbal responses were standardized on tape, and each protest was coordinated to a particular voltage level on the shock generator.
Now, as teacher, you are seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is to teach the learner a simple word pair test. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts. And you increase the shock 1 step on each error.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105 volts. Hard hit. Just how far can you go in this thing? As far as is necessary. What do you mean, as far as is necessary? To complete the test. Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
Wait a minute. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim.
Oh.
You don't know that.
Please continue.
Some psychologists were troubled by the ethics of it. Many, if not most subjects, found it a highly stressful, conflicted experience. People are stammering, stuttering, laughing hysterically, inappropriately.
150 volts.
Oh. Experimenter. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now. Get me out of here, please. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Responsible for it. This will be at 3:30.
180 volts.
Oh, I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man today.
According to Milgram, one of the things that's a prerequisite for carrying out acts that are evil is to shed responsibility from your shoulders and hand it over to the person in charge.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
Oh, I can't stand the pain. Let me out of here.
Can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man today. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering a less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
He didn't hold any gun to anybody's head. Just the fact that he conveyed a sense of authority. Roughly 60-65% of the people went all the way to the top of the shock board.
450 volts. That's it. Now continue using the last switch on the board, please. The 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue, please. I'm not getting no answer. Don't the man's health mean anything? Whether the learner likes it or not, we must... But he might be dead in there.
Well, who was actually pushing the switch?
I was. But he kept insisting. I told him no, but he said he's got to keep going.
This was only one study. He actually did 19 different experiments. In each one, he varied one aspect of the social situation. And in some studies, he got conformity, compliance, obedience up to 90%.
Quite simply, a statist is somebody who believes in having a state. Basically, anybody who wants government. Government is the exercise of authority over a people or place. And that is basically the right to rule. It's not just the ability to control other people, because most people have that in one way or another. It's the right. It's the idea that certain people, it's legitimate for them to forcibly control others. Belief in government is a purely faith-based, indoctrinated belief. It doesn't actually make any sense in practical terms or in evidence or in logic. For years, I thought it was a really good analogy to compare government to religion, and only a few years ago did I realize it's not an analogy. It is a religion in every way. It has a superhuman deity, government, that has rights that mortals don't. It isn't restricted by the rules that apply to mortals. It issues commands, and if you disobey, you're a sinner, and you deserve to be punished. The faithful, the true believers, they have great faith in these bizarre rituals, elections and legislation and appointments, and they dress up and then they say, ta-da, now I represent government. I know I just look like a person, but I don't just have the rights of a person because I represent the magical deity called government. And so I'm allowed to demand your money and boss you around and hurt you if you disobey me. I'm acting on behalf of government, and it has commandments called laws. And these laws aren't just the threats of humans. They are decrees from something superhuman. And so all you good people out there should bow to this deity. And if you want the world fixed, this is what you pray to. And we give you certain rituals of how to pray to it and when you're supposed to pray to it. And pray to the God to make the world what you wish it was and to save you from all the uncertainties of reality. The doctrine people are taught is just patently absurd. And a bunch of examples of that are like consent of the governed. There isn't such thing. If it's consent, it's voluntary. If it's being governed, it's not. The actual given excuse is, we have the right to rule you because you decided we did, even if you didn't vote for us, and even if you oppose everything we do to you. And, well, they represent us. Okay, they represent us by doing a lot of things that we don't have the right to do. And they represent us by bossing us around and taking our money. Like, I bet if I went to my neighbor and bossed him around and took his money and said, I'm representing you, he would say, what? What a stupid thing to say. To me, the most insane is, we are the government, which you hear everywhere. And I ask somebody, wait, do you really not notice that there's a group of people over there, they issue threats, and they call them laws, and they issue demands for money, and they call it taxes, and if you disobey, they send men with guns to hurt you. Now, are you really incapable of distinguishing between yourself and them? One of the biggest giveaways that the belief in government is a complete blind faith religious belief is the way people respond. One very easy line of questioning is, can you give somebody else a right that you don't have? And everybody says, well, no, of course not. Well, how about you and your buddy? Can the two of you give someone else a right that neither of you had? Well, no. And it only takes a couple more questions to get to, well, how did Congress get rights that you don't have? They get emotional and they get angry or they get defensive or they run away. They didn't come to this belief through reasoning and evidence and logic. They came there by having a blind faith belief smashed into their heads, starting before they could even talk. It's just something they were taught to believe, that there's this thing called authority, and that it's allowed to do things that human beings aren't, and that people have an obligation to obey it, to the point where, yeah, it's some people, they weren't gods or anything, some people wrote down a thing on paper, and then they called it legislation, and they did certain rituals, and then people go around saying, well, this is law. Most people literally feel physical discomfort and fear at the thought of disobeying anyone in authority. Most people can't say, no, I'm not going to do that, because it goes against their years and years of programming and indoctrination that trains them to think, if you do as you're told, you're good. If you don't, you're bad. And that's the message of school, and that message gets pounded in people's heads. Students are taught over and over and over and over again, every stinking day they're in school, that the measure of your virtue is how well you obey authority. The whole approval-disapproval thing. The one thing you learn in school is, if you do as you're told, you get approval and reward. And if you don't do as you're told, you get disdain and condemnation. They'll make sure everybody knows you're a bad person because you didn't do as you were told. The belief in authority leads everybody, good people, bad people, everything in between, to advocate and do things they wouldn't otherwise do, bad things they wouldn't otherwise do, including cops, because the cops really and truly believe that they have the right to do things that I don't have the right to do and you don't have the right to do. The only reason most of them do what they do is because they believe in authority, and they really believe that legislation gives them an exemption from morality. So that when they do something and someone says, hey, what you're doing is bad, hey, I don't make the law, I just enforce it. I'm not responsible for my actions. I'm just a tool of some weird thing somewhere else called government. You can't blame me for what I am personally doing because I'm not really doing it. As loony as that is, that's what most of them will say whenever somebody says, hey, what you're doing is wrong. It's not okay to, it's not okay to lock people up for smoking marijuana. It's not okay, all the ways in which quote unquote law enforcement initiates violence against nonviolent people. And if you bring that up to them, they literally talk as if they didn't do it. The only reason they do that is because they were taught the lie of authority and government and law along with everyone else, and then they were told, you're just a tool of the thing called law, and that makes it so you have rights that other people don't have. So you don't have to feel bad about physically assaulting nonviolent people because the law says it's okay. It really is just permission to ignore your conscience by saying you have rights that other people don't. You don't have the right to tell other people what habit to have on your own. You don't have the right to go and extort people on your own. But once you're law enforcement, then not only is it okay, it's noble and great to go around robbing people and bossing them around. That is the biggest danger of the belief in authority. It tricks good people into condoning or doing really nasty, horrible, violent things because they think, well, this is okay if government and authority does it.
They are raised by their parents, by the school, by the government, by the culture, by all the authoritarian messages built into everything to think that obedience is a virtue. And when you raise the culture to think that, and you get one nasty psycho at the top who says, hey, go do bad stuff, people say, well, I have to follow orders. I have to obey the law. I have to do as I'm told because that's a virtue. And then good people march off and do evil stuff. I'm not scared of the Maos and the Stalins and the Hitlers. I'm scared of the thousands or millions of people that hallucinate them to be authority and so do their bidding and pay for their empires and carry out their orders. I don't care if there's one loony with a stupid mustache. He's not a threat if the people do not believe in authority. Some people assume that, well, you must trust everybody if you don't want government. That's not at all true. I don't nearly trust everybody, but if I don't trust people to run their own lives, why on earth would I trust them to be in a position of power where they can forcibly run other people's lives?
Really what it boils down to is saying, I don't trust people. People are untrustworthy and unpredictable. So my solution is to take some of those people, some of the most untrustworthy around, give them permission to violently control us all. And that will protect us from the untrustworthiness of mankind. Okay, you're so scared of the average man out there and so thankful for government. Let me ask you, who has taken more of your money under threat of force? Private people threatening you or agents of authority threatening you? How many murders are committed by private people compared to how many are committed by people acting on behalf of authority? It's not even close. The number of murders committed in the name of law enforcement and government and authority completely dwarfs private murder. Even governments killing the people of other countries is small compared to them killing their own people. In the last 100 years, over 270 million human beings killed by their own governments, not counting war. That first step is always the hardest, to get someone to dare to set aside his blind faith long enough to think about things, to back up enough to say, maybe government isn't even legitimate at all. It takes a lot for people indoctrinated into the faith to dare to think of those literally blasphemous ideas that, no, those people in Washington don't have the right to rule. Their threats aren't laws, they're just threats. Their demands aren't taxes, it's just extortion. And that really feels like heresy, because it is. It is heresy against the God called government. I now have a huge amount of hope, because I see an acceleration of the number of people who dare to think about these things, and now the number of people able to have this conversation is just hugely exploding. And they're still a minority. But that exponential curve, I don't think it's stopping. I really think the cult of statism is as good as dead. Ultimately, I think the belief in government is doomed for the exact same reasons that the belief in a flat earth was doomed. There's too many people pointing out the utter inherent insanity in the belief, and that's just not going to go away. Nobody who understands self-ownership and understands why authority is inherently bogus wakes up the next day and says, suddenly, I think I should do whatever the politicians say. I think really humanity is just beginning to wake up to what it's supposed to be. Humanity wasn't meant to be a domesticated species owned by a ruling class. Every human being owns himself, is in charge of his own life. I'd like to see actual rational moral civilization in my lifetime, but we are going to get there. Sooner or later, we are totally going to get there. The lie will never outlive the truth forever.
Thank you for watching. I really wanted to make this video because Asmongold is somebody who inspires me as well, and he's somebody who brought me more into the Twitch scene over time as somebody who plays WoW. And my old gaming channel, Coconut TV, which has the Lot Row video, has a lot of WoW content on it, so you can check it out if you want. But I had a guild, I was a guild leader. That game taught me so much about life, but I never knew that Asmongold was such a thinker, like myself perhaps, and really talks about a lot of worldly events. So I figured it was just a moral obligation to make this video, and I'm glad to share my thoughts with you guys. I know that potentially this can be controversial, like I said, for some individuals, but really think it through, because World War II was not so long ago, and that was many individuals following the authority, perceived authority of some individual that they thought should rule over their lives and dictate how other people's lives should be lived. And this is the problem. If we can really nail down the root cause to these problems, I think the world can become much better. But the problem is, people don't want to talk about morality. They don't want to deal with their own problems. They don't want to point the finger at themselves. They might want to just keep pointing it elsewhere. So I know Asmongold talks a lot about how people are just trying to find purpose online and things to attack and stuff like that. That's not my goal, and that's why I don't seek money off of it or attention, and I don't like to point out different figures and call for their attention. But I felt the need to reach out to Asmongold because he seems pretty genuine, and he's somebody who I've long followed, and I think it's reasonable to say he will look at this situation objectively and share his thoughts. So I respect his thoughts and your thoughts. Please share them with me. Share this video with Asmongold if you'd like as well, because I just want to get the conversation started. Thank you very much for watching.